Hello, welcome back to Olson Farm and Photo. Today is seed starting day. So we're going to be planting a bunch of peppers and tomatoes today. I've got my pots and trays all washed behind me there. We'll be getting those out, and I've got checking make sure my grow lights are working, and they are. We won't need those quite yet today until they start germinating. So today is going to be, again, planting the peppers and tomato seeds, maybe a little basil as well. Last year, I went through a more complete seed starting video showing you the whole process. I'm not going to go through that all today. If you are looking for a more complete process video of that, you can go back and look at last year's video of 2020. This is February 19th, 2021. And I'm going to show you not the whole process, but I'll show you a few other things that I've kind of learned and tips and tricks along the way. So I want to show you my heating setup for my seed starting. Since I'm starting so many seeds at once, I've only got 2 seed starting mats, and so I'm kind of using some other devices that I have around to kind of warm up the soil. So right here, what I've got is a big kind of water trough that I usually start chicks in when I get chicks. I'll start them in here inside. Down here, this big black rectangle is a kind of a chick warmer. It's a panel that you use instead of like the heat lamps, and so they can kind of huddle around that. And so I've got that on inside. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay these trays out on top here. So I'm kind of creating this heat source underneath. Okay. So then I do still have my seed starting mats, which I'll put probably most likely under the tomatoes. They need to be the warmest to germinate. So I'll get those going, and then essentially what I'll do is, once I fill these trays and put the soil in and seed in, I'm going to lay them out just like that. Room for 4 or 5 if I squeeze them. We'll see how many trays I take up once we get going with the seeds. I've got a lot more tomatoes and peppers than I did last year, so I want to make sure I have enough space. I do also have, since we are outside, and we're in a large metal shop that there's a tack room that I insulated and filled in the walls with straw, and then boarded over, so it's fairly well insulated. I can get it pretty warm in here. And the main source of that is this radiant heater, oil heater here, that we use to warm up the room in general. So I've got that going. I've got the chick warmer underneath the trays going, and then I've got my 2 seed mat heating mats that'll go into tomatoes. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to see how many trays we end up with, and then go from there. Here I'm just filling up my trays. Taking a little my potting mix, putting in each of the 2-inch supply trays here. So I brought in some warm water from the house, since we don't have hot water out here. So I want to at least get a good jump start on the temperature of the water. So I'm going to pour in water probably about halfway up the tray, so that'll soak in from the bottom. And then once the seeds are in, then I'll start. I've got a sprinkler head on this water that I can kind of put on top of the seeds. All right, got my first tray ready here on my table here. Again, the water hasn't quite soaked in yet. Letting it still do a little bit on the bottom here. So it's still relatively dry on top, but once I get the seeds in, I'm gonna sprinkle a little water on top. A couple important notes here is I've got a 1 marked on this tray here, just because I'm gonna have 2 trays of tomatoes. So I wanna make sure I keep them separate, which one's which. I also have on the top here, you might be able to see it, a little black mark here. That's kind of this black tab that I always use as kind of the top of the tray, so I know which way is the top. And then I'll bring you over here just a bit, just to show you my layout here. So what I've got here is my planting records list here. So I've got date, quantity, variety, plant. I've already got my garlic in there from last spring. So that's in the garden itself. But here's where I'm going to list all my types, how many seeds I plant, and then I'm also going to mark the germination date just to keep a record of that. Then over here, I've got a 6 by 12 grid table that I've created, and so I'm going to mark out, and this corresponds with the 72 cells that I have in the trays. So I'm going to mark out which seeds are in which cell. So if I don't necessarily, I can keep track of where each plant is planted. All right, and then that's the last of the seeds for the last tray here. I'm going to move it over to the heating area and give a little water on top, put a lid on it, and we'll be done.